Board of Education meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thank you everybody for coming. This is a general board meeting for us. So we have a few things to get to first. So bear with us. And the first thing is public participation. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, so we have summer's a busy time for us, and as I mentioned to the board, I just wanted to go through the summer projects, kind of what we're in the middle of. There's a curriculum, human resources, technology, finance, facilities, and so forth. So human resources is multitude of reports, system updates. Our frontline system that we use for hiring and for personnel has all been updated and configured, kept Heather very busy. A lot more hiring with turnover than we expected, 16 teachers. These are new positions, but turnover. 3 secretaries, 10 paras, a couple of food services. New employee orientation is also being planned right now as well. Probably the 2 biggest tasks for Heather and Human Resources right now are staff planning for the closing of Rhode Island Avenue and the work that goes ahead to reconfigure the district, and then the teachers negotiations and the Teamsters negotiation, which is coming up as well. In the area of finance, Stacy has a new headache. There's a new educational financial system for the state. Is it actually called EFS, Educational Financial System?
Oh, that would agree.
Great acronym. The old ED 001 is gone, and this is an incredibly time-consuming process for Stacy, which every single Board of Ed account needs to be coded 6 different ways in order to satisfy the unified chart of accounts that legislation was passed. Yeah. So a lot of financial data going around. It'll provide information around grants, food services, private funding, local funding, registrations accounts, so forth. That's just one task. We hired a new bank. Wells Fargo, unfortunately, got downgraded, no longer can hold municipal funds. And we switched.
Unfortunately, Tom?
Unfortunately, for the amount of work it's going to cause finance.
My mortgage is ready to place a phone.
Long RFP process, and we switched to Peoples. And Tom, the town has switched, right? We're all switched over to Peoples, right? Is that?
We're working on it.
No.
Oh,
No, that's
Okay.
in process, in process.
Okay.
I think it's,
Closing out the 17-18 year, and then the auditors come in September, which is a lot of work for Stacy, preparing for that for her office. And her office also, by the way, is joint with the schools, so preparing for the Board of Selectmen strategic planning process. In technology, transportation, and food services, significantly right now the work is heavy in technology for Art and his department. Obsolescence replacement, all of our deliveries come in July and August, are replacing hardware and so forth. We have replacement of laptops and Chromebook carts coming in. Big project at the high school with the one-to-one initiative for all freshmen, so that's a lot of time and a lot of planning and a lot of processes. Some infrastructure improvements as well are going on in data closets at the high school and at Polson. Tech doesn't take vacations in the summer. That's their busiest time of the year, really. A lot of website updates, which I'll show briefly as well, some of the website additions that we've made. Facilities, Bill gave a good report, some updates to the Finance Committee. We have a lot of work going on at Polson right now. Some classroom renovations are going on, some painting, floor tile removal, and so forth, locker repairs. At Brown and Ryerson are off the grid right now, Bill, correct? Until, what, sometime in August, correct? Yeah. So we have electrical updates going on there. A lot of carpet being done, and then some basic maintenance being done at Jeffrey and at Ryerson. And then some roofing and siding over here at Green Hill and Town Campus. And Bill will give an update to the Finance Committee as well for that. I'm sorry, the Facilities Committee in the near future. Curriculum work is fast and furious during the summer. Gail learns her keep with her team. We have a lot of work going on in science and in CTE. Those are the 2 programs that we're going through renewal right now. But out of every grade, of every department, I think the area under the closest inspection right now is high school English. Spending a lot of time with the high school English department and some work that'll come forward to the board down the road as well. A lot of state reports go on out of Gail's office as well. Graduation requirements is a policy that'll be coming to the policy committee. She's been working on that. Gail does the final interviews as well for all new certified staff. And planning the new teacher orientation is a joint effort with Human Resources. We have a leadership retreat. We do 5 or 6 days over the summer, and Gail and I joint plan that. The district reconfiguration work, going from 6 schools to 5, is a Herculean task, and we're on target, but a lot of work over the summer there. A lot of work being done for our student intervention programs, and as the board's well aware, the balanced scorecards going live, now the board adopted. A lot of that work also is coming out of Gail's office and my office. And special education, ESY, the extended school year is a huge program, and a lot of work comes out of there. Liz's office during the summer. So a lot of balls up in the air, a lot of work. We get a lot done during the summer, don't we?
A lot of time.
Yeah. So that's our summer projects update. Any questions or any input? Okay. A couple of other matters. I mentioned in the board memo that Representative Cocaruta forwarded a grant opportunity to Mr. Banish and to myself last Thursday. It's a very narrow window, closes July 30th. It's under the U.S. Department of Education's Community-Oriented Policing Services. It's a school violence prevention program. That's the name of the grant, SVPP. And there's $25 million available. Projects can be reimbursed for up to 75% funding if it is approved. We're finding out a lot. We have, is it Lori or Lauren, our grant writer? Lori. Our grant writer from the town side just jumped into the fray, and she's just started rolling her sleeves up to try to help us write this grant. And we're working with Jack and Joe Race across the parking lot, the police department, to see if it's something we can possibly pull off by July 30th. It's a very tight timeline. It is not for personnel, it's not for anything like in that regard, but any type of systems that we're considering under our 2 strategies of speeding up responses and slowing down threats. So, hardware, those kinds of things that we can look at, notification systems, and so forth. So we have a few ideas that are out there, and we're looking to pursue the grant, and I'll keep the board updated on that. And the last thing I wanted to update the board on is we have some updates to the website around the district reconfiguration. Let this boot up. So what we did is we took information on our report. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Bill. Okay. So on our district website, we have a lot of content that's going to be uploaded this summer, a significant amount of content. This is the first of what I see as a lot by the time everyone reports back. So if you scroll down here on the buttons, we have a reconfiguration tab. And if you click that, I'm not going to go through all the text, but you can see just a brief overview of what's happening in the district right now, kind of where we're headed. Some of the statutory responsibilities of the board are in this paragraph here. Just some statements about the web page. And then down below are some buttons here. The first button, where we've been, some of the recommendation and maintenance and renovation has been done over time. So we take that and some text here that you can read at your own leisure. Goes back to the 1997. We didn't go back before 1997. We started that. We figured that 20 years was long enough. And a little history, a chronology of what was done. The 97 report basically led to the new high school. 2010 report, most of the projects were put on ice due to the economic climate. And then the most recent study that we're here for tonight, 2014. And then the reports that were done in conjunction with that. And kind of brings us to just about the present day, the referendum fail, the new district reconfiguration model, and then the most recent adoption of the 10-year capital maintenance plan of the board that will go to the Board of Selectmen and CIP. What's included in the reports, some good information here on, well, what is an architectural report? What is a mechanical electrical systems report? What do the enrollment projections actually do? So you have some background there, so it's helpful for folks who are interested. Yes?
Do we have a website counter for these? Can we tell how many people are clicking on this?
I'm pretty sure that we do have I'm looking around and Art's not here, but I'm not sure.
When we put it on.
Count clicks, right?
That'd be useful.
Yeah, for traffic, yeah. So that's that, where we are right now with the imminent closure of Island. We put our Gantt chart up, a little public-friendly Gantt chart. You look at it, you know, it's, gotta get the magnifying glass out. So you can take a look here. Really just want to go front and center. What do parents care about? They want to know what redistricting is. Okay, so we have it right there in black and white, it's October 1st. Transportation, spring of 19. Staffing assignments, January 1. I mean, out of that massive Gantt chart, those are the three things the community probably cares about the most. But what I liked is that, and I got to thank Bill and Wendy a lot for this, if you go through each school, and we have a couple details still we have to clean up, some numbers are not accurate, but if you click on a school, it'll take you to just some good information about an individual school, when it was built, square footage, any additions that were made, total square footage, and then what improvements and costs were done over time. So you can kind of see just looking at one school, it gives you a nice little chronology there, and then you get just some basic pictures of you know, the facility itself. So, well, we didn't put Island Avenue up here, in full disclosure. We put the other 5 schools up here right now. And then this is the timeline that we talk about. This was developed late fall last year. You can click it, and when you click it, you will need your magnifying glass. You can go in and see the actual tasks that we've laid out. It's a simple Gantt chart with timelines in here. The shaded out bars are the ones that we've already taken care of. So it's good information for the community. Where we're headed, following the adoption on June 19th, as I said earlier, Board of Selectmen, and if approved, ultimately the CIP committee for consideration. And what you have here is some more hyperlinks to the capital plan. And then for the community, a Board of Selectmen link and a CIP link, just to look at agendas if they're kind of breezing around the website. So this is the beginning of it. It's some good substance for the community. And I say beginning, this is just the beginning of a lot of website development we're doing. Just about a year ago, we got a new platform. And what I love about the platform is it's very easy on the eyes and very easy to manipulate on a mobile, tablet, or phone. We're looking into the possibility of a district app, which actually would be also easy to interface with for parents in the community if you want to download an app for the district. So more work to come, but I just wanted to share that with the board.
Can I just point out for a second, lest anybody think we're just frivolously spending on a new website, which by the way is awesome, I think. But we were caught up as a defendant in a lawsuit that there was an educational support group or something.
Office of Civil Rights, it was
the
accommodations.
Office of- yeah.
Accommodations.
And some nonprofits that were going around and trying to get school boards to improve their websites so that they're like compliant with ADA and with
Visually impaired.
and
It's the
visually
same for the
impaired.
town, Seth.
What's that?
It's the same for the
Yeah,
town.
yeah. So the town, yes. Okay, so you guys know already. Sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So all the reports are up here. You know, if you're interested, a little bit of text to kind of get background on it as well, and a little historical chronology. We can always go deeper. Bill is the resident historian on these reports. Some dates in there. As I said, though, on the school links, there's some numbers that are off that we have to just correct. Some project numbers that were in there are not actual work numbers. So, and Reed said she'll fix those tomorrow.
Tom, can I ask a quick
Yeah.
question? I'm not sure I'm allowed to, but
I guess fine.
noticing that you just showed that you're linking to the Board of Selectmen and the CIP on the Board of Ed site, is there a way that on the town website we can be linking to this as well, just to ensure that we're getting better communication to
I
everybody?
mean, Rita could just,
Reed is a webmaster for town and schools, so that
Yeah,
would be
Lincoln.
at all. So Tom directs her if he needs certain
That'd be
sites.
awesome.
Yeah.
They're very easy to embed.
My question is, it's gonna answer all the questions that all the parents are asking, to the most, as much as we can. How are we gonna let them know that this is up there?
Yeah, so I'm gonna send out e-notify. I'm gonna start a superintendent's blog. probably the beginning of the school year, like in September.
Okay.
So I'll send out e-notify, and in that message, you can sign up for a notification system for any additions to my blog.
Okay.
So if I add an entry or a video or something, there'll be an email sent to you if you sign up.
Okay.
Right now, it's a kind of check back regularly status.
For the
You know,
blog.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, for this, so they can,
Okay.
but we'll send the e-notify out. We could over the summer, I don't know how many parents will be kind of checking that. We'll probably send out when we're ready to go with the numbers on those schools, we'll send that out to
Saying,
parents.
check
to
out this
notify.
tab, this
Yeah.
is new, you'll find this information. Great.
But we can, it's live now, so if
It is.
parents approach you and Stop and Shop
Oh,
and
yeah.
things like that,
Yeah.
then send them, because it's great information.
Yeah, that's great. I think just getting the word out there that this is there.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, the room.
Yeah, no, this is pretty clear. I think the Gantt chart does a great job of capturing the tasks that have to get done, it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And also just some of those seminal dates we just put out as redistricting, transportation, staffing, those are kind of
That's what they care about.
the holy trinity right now. I think people want to know that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was,
Any other questions? I failed to mention Greg is on the phone too. I should have said that at the outset. Apologize.
Hey, everybody.
Hi,
Greg.
Sorry, Greg.
okay.
All right, so moving, are you done with other matters?
I am done.
Okay. So welcome to our special guests, distinguished guests. We really appreciate having you here. And we just thought this would be a good opportunity to come together now that the board has formally adopted the 10-year CIP plan for facilities.
Yeah, so this is, this is not new for board members who have been on Selectmen and Finance in the past. We've had these meetings before, led up to a failed referendum, but many of you were on the table last time. This is, I think if anything, the board understands, the Board of Ed, and I can speak on behalf, that any resolution, the pathway, needs to go through the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. So we all have to be on the same page as far as making any plan work. We have a recently adopted capital maintenance plan on June 19th, which I believe you have copies of. Bill has hard copies as well. I think that one of the most important points to make is that this was put together with a very dispassionate look at our facilities. It was not for a consideration of projecting what the electorate may say or may not say. It was not developed with a consideration for what CIP may or may not be able to handle. It was simply a dispassionate look at the facilities and the, I guess, the life expectancy of different systems. They could be, picked apart and parsed apart a little bit here or there, but they're really just necessary maintenance projects that have to happen to keep the 5 schools over the 10+ years. This is purpose tonight really is a brief overview, and I'll hand it to Seth because he chairs the facilities committee. Tonight is just really a brief overview, open up the discussion, and as I kind of have seen it and have shared with the board, I see this as a community problem to solve, the same way that we framed this last time around. We failed the referendum, didn't make the problem go away. The problem still exists, and we have to come up with a solution. And I would recommend to the board, and I think where we are right now is that we do our best to solve it together. Seth.
Well, good evening. I know my fellow board members thank you all for attending this, and I thank you for attending this special tri-board meeting, and we welcome you to these proceedings. The purpose of this meeting is twofold. First, it's to officially introduce our sister boards to the Board of Education's 10-year Master Facilities Plan. Second, in recognition of the enormity of our findings, as expressed in this report, it's our intent to utilize this tri-board meeting to kick off a community discussion about the costs associated with maintaining our schools and whether continuing under the present course is advisable. As is our statutory charge, we are reporting our findings out to the community. We will require the assistance of our sister boards to facilitate this important public debate, and perhaps to support any course change the community opts to explore. In collaborating, we can plan efficiently and develop shared outlooks on the community's preferences. By way of background, we have endured over a decade of austerity budgets. While we can all take some degree of pride as elected leaders in keeping tax increases reasonable, much needed maintenance has been put off and our buildings are in need of substantial attention. The Board of Education took the position that we need a full, frank, objective audit of each school's needs and the real cost to address those needs. The board undertook a facility study 2 years ago to determine whether our shrinking district enrollment could present an opportunity to consolidate schools. That study, performed by the professional consulting firm DRA, yielded a report that warned of a huge cost factor to keep all of our schools open and properly maintained. That report served as impetus for the school board to elect to contract its facility stock and improve 2 of its buildings. That plan went to referendum in September 2017 and for a variety of reasons failed. A main reason cited by many folks was the insertion of misinformation into the debate that caused uncertainty. After the failed referendum, the board elected to follow its plan to close Island Avenue Elementary School and realign the district. These moves were deemed necessary in order to contain maintenance and operational expenses in light of our shrinking enrollment. Closing Island Avenue School after this academic year will eliminate approximately $13 million in maintenance costs over the next 10 years alone, and will also save approximately $1 million in carrying and operating costs annually. That's about $23 million in avoided costs over the next decade with the closure of that elementary school. Also, after the failed referendum, the school board and administration needed to determine the size of the maintenance problem, given the mandate of the voters to keep the remaining schools online. The board commissioned and the superintendent led an effort to audit our school buildings. That audit resulted in this 10-year facilities master plan. I'd like to add some context for this plan from the perspective of the board and its facilities committee, and then I'll turn the proceedings over to the superintendent for a quick word, which he already gave, so you're off the hook there, and to the director of facilities, Bill McMinn, for the presentation of the report. There will be ample opportunity for Q&A during Bill's presentation, and our hope is to hold an open discussion among the 3 boards thereafter. Connecticut General Statute Section 10-220, entitled Duties of Boards of Education, mandates that local boards of education develop and deliver plans on an updating basis. It requires local school boards to make the determination of what is in the best interest of the students and the state in terms of providing and maintaining adequate educational facilities. It specifically requires school boards to affirmatively improve air quality, citing with particularity HVAC systems. It requires the local school board to report facilities, plans, and updates to the state. While mandated to make educational facility planning determinations, the school board nevertheless welcomes opportunities like this to conduct outreach and to collaborate with our fellow boards to ensure that we get adequate community feedback and town leadership consensus to generate viable planning. As for the report itself, we owe a big thanks to Superintendent Scarice, Bill McMinn, and our vendor consultants at Colliers International. The report is a powerful tool that calculates detailed and accurate estimates and comps from actual projects our district and Colliers have worked on recently in support of the estimation process for each line item on the report. I'll let Bill explain, but this report even accounts for price escalation for postponed work. This is top-level work, and we're thankful to Tom, Bill, and our friends at Colliers for collaborating to bring us this accurate, well-supported estimation and planning tool. We're quite aware that the net result of this report is a huge number that will shock the conscience. We understand that this represents a huge problem for the town to address, and we took very seriously our statutory charge to get this right. We are using best practices in consultation with Colliers to address the real costs of maintaining our aging schools. They require substantial upkeep and updating, including code compliance and ADA upgrades. Their systems will fail if not replaced. There are entire electrical services and plumbing services that need to be replaced. Roofs need to be replaced at certain intervals. Many of the line items are necessary for the health, security, and safety of our children as required by the statute, which requires safe school facilities and a plan to improve air quality. There is no fluff here, and guess what? At the end of the cycle, we get to start all over again, and at a higher cost factor, because we're just maintaining what we already have. Finally, the board recognizes that there must be a better way, but our hands are tied at the moment because the recent referendum was a mandate to not do anything else with our facilities for now, other than maintain the buildings presently in service. We believe this honest, frank tool will spark a new debate in town. We are reasonably sure that Madison's intelligent townsfolk will view the present path as untenable. This is the first step in a process. We are providing an open, honest, public assessment of our facility maintenance needs so that they're known. The Board of Education stands ready, willing, and able to foster debate, to develop alternate plans if that is what the consensus is from our citizens, and to move forward to another referendum if that is what folks wish to do. Thanks for joining us at the very outset of this process.
Okay. So, thank you. So I think Bill's gonna go through the document in more detail. And while he passes that out, working in the medical field, I kind of see this as, I'm gonna do like truncate what I think what you said, but which is, I kind of see this as an overall diagnosis of the problem, and we're looking now to find a treatment plan, whether that's a clinical trial and something totally out of the box, or standard treatment, or so we really look to you and your expertise and your input and guidance in any way that you can help
And I think
cure the patient.
one of the key points, as Tom pointed out, and he went over it very quickly, when you highlight his presentation, you'll go right to this sheet on the website.
So this is on the website. This is the 10-year plan. It's actually more than 10 years. Yep, you got it right there. So the one thing that we wanted to make sure is that any project on here can kind of easily go into the CIP process with backup data, backup reports, comparables, and so forth. So what we did is we hyperlinked the project number, I believe, Bill?
Yes.
The project number, I don't do it yet. The project number can be clicked, and bring you down a little trail where you can see exactly where we came up with the need, the cost, and the timeline of when it needs to be repaired or maintained and so forth, so different systems. The report's broken down by school. As you can see, it goes horizontally across the years. We do have the age of the facility also in that row with the years as well. So you can see some of these facilities are certainly up there in years with original systems, many of them. Just to pick on a roof, the 1982 roof at Jeffrey School. It's a matter of time, for example, that we would need to be replacing a roof from 1982. So that's just one of a number of projects here. The escalation costs, so if we put a project out, it looks kind of high, and it's 7 years out, and that's because Colliers uses an industry standard of a 4% increase, inflationary increase every year. So, a roof that is $100,000 now, if we're going to do it in 10 years, do the math, 4% a year, and that was put into effect as well. We also included, Stacy, we took out planning and engineering costs by project.
They're included in.
I'm sorry, included in each individual project as opposed to one planning and engineering fund, and that was per the request of CIP as well. So those are baked in. A couple of other numbers that are baked into each project are just some filing and application and kind of code things that we would have to do with the town. So I guess the long story short is a couple of folks were in the room 5 years ago, 4 years ago when DRA was our original consultant and said, if you just pursue a do-nothing plan, meaning just maintenance, you're looking at $80 to $100 million. And now when we did all the background work, that's the number that we arrived at. That's not a surprise to board members who were there at that point in time. So I think the board looks at it as a community problem to solve. How do we approach this, in a way that we can solve this problem? So Bill, you want to kind of tag team this one here? So
Sure.
The report itself, if you take a look at, Bill, let's pick one that maybe is only a couple of years out. maybe why don't you scroll down a little bit?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a great point. Seth made a great point. One of the factors
And
that.
I did it in under 30 seconds.
It's a first.
One of the factors for consideration for the facilities committee was to come up with the criteria for prioritizing projects. So they were rank sorted based on a criteria that was developed. It was suggested by Colliers, and it was massaged a little by the facilities committee. And that came up with a kind of a ranking system and a number system. We have that document for you as well. It's a couple pages just to explain how we prioritize those projects. Useful life was obviously a big one. Constructability sequence, which was new learning for me. Obviously, if you want to get a new HVAC system, you would need to get a new electrical system to accommodate that. The 1950s building don't necessarily accommodate an HVAC system. If you're going to do an HVAC system, you better look at your windows and doors and your roof and so forth, the envelope of the building. So those were put into a proper sequence based on constructability. So that also was taken into account in the prioritization. Sheriff Polson, so you can see here, as we go across here, you can see, Bill, that's how old the building is, right,
Yes.
59? This is how old the building is as you go by each year. Nod to Bruce Wilson for that suggestion. We put that in there, Bruce.
It's a year built right here, and
Got it.
every year it's
I think it was in our system.
And then as you take a look at the individual projects here, you have a project code, you have the title, you have the prioritization, and then where it fits on the chart. The chart actually goes out into beyond 2030. Bill, why don't we just, okay, take ventilation systems. Yeah. So if you click the project, you can do this from your own device. So you're going to look only at column D right now. Column E is a separate project. You take a look at column D. You got the description up here. Replaced from the CES report dated October 2015. So we did our best to tie every single project into a report that had analysis, a little background on what needs to be done, how much it costs, how much a design budget, a construction budget. The escalation cost is a big factor. Look at smartphone. The escalation cost right there, line number 11, that's the 4% factor, total construction, when it would start, permits and so forth. As you can see, contingency, it's Bill's standard 10%, it goes all the way down. These numbers can be changed, obviously, and we know that. This project can be put out another 2 years or 3 years or done a year in advance. That's not the point of tonight, because that can all be done. This can all be inspected and numbers can be moved around. I think the point of tonight is there's a $100 million problem. And maybe it's an $80 million problem. That's still a big problem. And we have to figure out a way that we're going to approach this. And this is a good opportunity for initial discussion before we go to CIP and how are we going to approach this collaboratively. The Board of Ed has the opportunity to come up with a plan. We put together a maintenance plan. That was a necessary step after the referendum failed. That was something that we had to do after the referendum failed. But now we're at the point where this is the maintenance plan that we put together, and numbers can be changed and timelines can be modified. It's still a pretty big problem.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? What do you mean by maintenance? Does this include anything beyond the cost of the basic building structure and systems? Is there anything that would consider?
There's no new planetarium. Or
nothing
theater arts
programmatic,
facility,
nothing
no
designed to
pool.
enhance the learning environment, no reconfiguration.
I bet we can look at projects and say that's an enhancement. Okay, I bet we can do that, and I think we can also get trapped in the weeds by doing that. It's still a $100 million problem.
I understand, but I just want to be.
The playground.
What is your intent here? Because it makes a difference. If it's $100 million that solves all of our educational issues related to facilities, it's one thing. If it's $100 million that just replaced roofs and windows and lighting,
Sure.
that's quite another. So I'm just asking a
No, that's a fair
clarification.
point. I think it depends on how you look at it too, and I think as a board, that's something we grapple with. I mean, some might suggest that HVAC would be an enhancement or something like that, not a necessary if you're adding it to a school that doesn't have it right now. So there are some things like that. There are some you know,
And by the same token, the HVAC system still needs to be replaced. So there's still a sizable cost there.
I was really not, I would consider that a mechanical system.
Yes, they are large.
So one can argue about, is it necessary to do it or spend that much money to do it? But if you've got a system that's at the end of its useful life, you're going to spend something to replace it. I was asking a different question. I wanted to ask a different question, which is beyond that sort of repair of the building envelope and the systems within it, were you attempting in this $100 million to address programmatic instructional needs for the 5 schools?
As I said, I bet you can make a case that some things in there could be, but
Did you intend that?
I don't
Was
believe
that
so.
your intention?
No, it wasn't the intention at all.
There's a
But I'm
couple
sure
things,
someone
like
will
there's
make a
playgrounds,
case.
which are variable, could have a variable. You could go a really high-end playground or a lower-end playground. There's furniture replacement, right? But that all is going to need, they're going to need furniture at some point, so there's a little bit of discretionary.
But Ben, is that what you're not asking that, right? You're asking more programmatic within the school itself, right?
Right, when
No,
we looked
they're
at, yeah,
Not the intention at all.
reconfiguring the space in order to facilitate
Oh.
more contemporary approach to pedagogy.
No,
To,
no.
So this is all bricks and mortar, right?
Systems.
But
So envelope of the building, mechanical, electrical,
right, but capital
plumbing,
to what end? That's
fire
what I'm trying to
prevention.
get at.
I think
I heard
what I'm
maintenance
saying
versus
is
enhancement.
this is really R&M.
Yeah.
I guess
Any
it-
existing structures, you'll get enhancements based on newer, but for the most part R&M.
But can I just ask, when, at the outset, what I was hearing was that these are needs. I understand that a person might look at this and say that these things should get done perhaps at some point in time. But when I hear a need, the first thing I think about to myself is that it better happen in that year and that all these things are absolutely required. Now I'm hearing that people are kind of stepping back from that a little bit. Maybe that's not the, maybe I'm just the one who's the literal one, you know, looking at that, thinking of that word.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to understand is, which items here would you folks consider as absolutes?
So I don't-
And in those years, like, as somebody said, that within a particular year, it's got to really happen in that year because it's at the critical stage. I'm not saying that all things.
Yeah,
are
no, I
critical
understand.
stage, but you get my point.
I think it may be helpful to talk layman to layman about these topics to maybe make sense of it, because Bill can talk more specific. I look at it this way. My inspector said I need a roof in around 5 years. Okay, that's kind of what we're looking at. In my house, I need a roof in about 5 years. Could I do 6 years? Yeah. Maybe 7? Yeah. Do I want to do 15 years? No. So I don't think that it's fair to say that we can put a specific date. We've been told certain systems are past their useful life, that we can't get replacement parts for them. And then we've been told, that's extreme, to a lesser degree, that in 3 to 5 years, this is going to be failing. And the gold standard with capital projects is don't wait for them to fail. So I don't think that we can put a hard, fast date on things. This was a very, very solid estimate by experts in the field of what those timelines are. And I do believe that we can change a year here or there from what I've been told. Can we change 8 years, 10 years? I think that's an appropriate plan.
So Tom, even in your example of the 5-year roof though, I mean, the reality is it could fail in 1, it could fail in
Right.
2 also. I mean, so you go the other way.
So that, I think that the priority
extreme,
thing, Bill,
though.
you
Yeah.
could explain really well too, and how they kind of came to each
Sure.
project and prioritizing.
I think this one that we have, the ventilation system here, I'm gonna jump to the top before I go to the priority.
Yeah.
I think it explains the history right here. It says, you know, it was installed in 1997. You know, that equipment is outlived its life, you know, I mean, we need to replace it and we need to plan it. Is it gonna fail tomorrow? No, I bet we can get 5 more years out of it. Should we? No, definitely
Well,
not.
why not no? Just curious. Why do you
Because
think, why
if
do you say
it,
no?
It's more
because,
expensive.
and the real issue is, because if it doesn't work, the kids don't learn. If it doesn't work and there's no air conditioning in the classroom, those kids aren't learning. And so that's a different thing from a facilities guy. When I did town buildings or something, you know, the accounting department's unhappy with me, they don't have any air conditioning, oh well. If the kids don't have air conditioning or heat, they're not learning, the teacher's not teaching, so it's different.
But I think with this part of the building, though, it's really important. These are interior classrooms. This is not windows open the outside air, that kind of thing. These are interior classrooms that need ventilation.
I was just saying, I, you know, I went to school and I didn't have air conditioning, I learned.
Yeah, that's why I want to make that point. It's not about air
The
conditioning.
thing that I was just following up on Mark's
Yep.
question, and I think you got to a part of it, which was the timeline
Mhm.
on when, which is
Yeah.
what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
But the two buckets, which is absolute requirement,
Yep.
something that we need to do,
Mhm.
versus something that's a nice to have.
Yeah.
And then as it looked at kind of in those two.
In my estimation, there's no nice to have on this list. This is 14 years of, this is the crap we have to do. Period.
Explain, it's not a 10-year plan, it's a 14-year plan?
Yes.
That's,
Yeah, some of the, like the high school generator, for example, that goes out 14 years and so forth. So some of that goes beyond 10 years. You're hitting a good point, but again, for me to make sense of this, I'm a teaching and learning guy. That's what I was trained to do, okay? So I had to become a student of this. And the only way I was able to wrap my mind around it was actually thinking of the only structure that I own is my house.
Right.
So what would I do if somebody, what did I do when someone took a dispassionate look at my house and said, I don't know what's in your savings account. I don't know what your family situation's like, but I know this, you got 5 years left on your roof. So what did I do? Did I roll the dice? Did I do something in 3 years? Did I wait 6 years? You know, I think.
It's a personal thing that changes by person, right?
Yeah, so I think we gotta make a collective community decision, it's kind of the point here.
Put the stake in it.
Yeah.
And
this-
put a stake in it.
And this is a planning tool, and one
That's
thing
a
that
good
we really need to make the point about, this is a planning tool, and this is an advanced tool that no other district has used according to Collier's, where, you know, you can manipulate stuff, move it around and say, all right, let's move this out 1 year and see what it does to the total cost. So it does give us the ability to slide things around a little. It's not, our intent was not to be rigid, nor is the document rigid. It's a great tool, it's flexible, but, you know, we realize that, you know, obviously, you know, there's not $100 million sitting in a pot somewhere.
And the purpose of tonight is not to be rigid, and the purpose of tonight is not to produce a kind of instant reaction. This is a consideration for what we had to do in response to a failed referendum. These projects didn't go away. So what's going to be our collective strategy and approach? We have time to kind of consider that right now. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, when I see the Polson number at $40 million over the 10-year period of time, it's not surprising to me, because I did go to a couple of your
Yeah.
sessions, and I was hoping the number was going to change the second time I showed up, but it didn't.
So are we.
But, actually, slow down. But now that it's a $40 million, it's effectively 40% of the total. I mean, and again, I guess that's what it comes down to, right? Is how do we get this out to the public? I'm sure that they've already saw it, I think already seen it. I know that there was an article about this not too long ago by So. And, but I think people have to understand what we're looking at here, obviously. I mean, I know you know this, but I wonder, how do we get their feedback? I guess that's what you and Seth were talking about earlier. Get it, but is there, you know, we should be thinking about surveying and that type of thing. I mean, we've got to do something here, because this is, you know, assuming that all of these things truly are required. Because when I see interiors, when I see that being 6 million of the total, I don't really know what that means. Maybe Bill will go over that tonight. But, you know, that seems to me to be something that is not one of the rocks that we might need. But I don't know. You know, we'll have to see what Phyllis has to say. But anyway, just a couple of thoughts. We've got to really. Is there ever any consideration of just not utilizing that school? Is it really worth it? Now let's get back to talking about your car instead of your house now. Okay. You got a 2001 Acura up there, right? And you got 200,000 miles on it. Is it really worth putting the money into that vehicle?
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, we're kind of getting, I know, just real quick, Scott. Is that the conversation that we should be having with the public?
I think that's the point of tonight, in essence, Mark, is that this is where the board was confronted with coming up with an approach after the failed referendum, and a deep dive into what is the problem, how are we going to try to solve it. Here's the problem, and I think engaging the community is kind of what you're alluding to. Is this the only pathway? It might be, and then again, it might not be. And I think you kind of alluded to the point about the Polson School itself, the use of that school with that kind of investment. Engaging the community is something the last board did, I think, incredibly well. We had 6 or 7 public forums, some incredibly well attended, a lot of one-on-one meetings and so forth. At the end of the day, that failed, that plan failed. Problem didn't go away, so what's the next plan?
Is there any, and I know we've sort of alluded to it in some of our meetings, but is there any scenario where not utilizing one of these buildings and doing a referendum for a new school is cheaper, or is it always more expensive, more than 100 million?
And going to
Sorry.
4 schools?
Oh, no, not even going to 4 schools, like if we were to build a new, not use Ryerson anymore and build a new elementary school, like, so the price tag we had on that was 34 million. On here, I think it's 15 million to fix it, so by my count, my math, it adds another 15 million to the total here, so does it save us money after the fact? I mean, are we gonna
This is
go
only
down
the
that
first
road?
10 years, like, you would have to then consider the
Well, you'll
next 10
still
years.
have to also, though,
Yeah.
maintain that school, it's not like you build it and then it takes care of itself.
My thinking may be off, but I think also at the time, Happy, that included taking Island off, which is not included in here, which was another 15 million. So that was kind of a net neutral on that number then. Because you had the 15 million for Island plus the 15 million for Ryerson, and that was 34 million. But then you had the Jeffrey
But the
problem.
referendum was to build your new school at $34,
Kinda raise it higher.
$34 million price tag, wasn't it?
So you were taking Island and Ryerson, their maintenance needs combined, that was just shy of 34 million.
Okay.
Can I do a follow-up to kind of what Mark was saying? And I guess similar to what Happy actually just said too. So given the problem that was presented to you guys as a Board of Education, and the solution that's in front of us today with a $100 million maintenance program, were there other solutions considered? And should other solutions be considered, whether it be, another attempt at a referendum or, consolidation of options? I don't know what the answers are, but have you guys considered other options? And should you be considering other options?
No, we haven't, and the discussion will be.
We did have one idea, and we had Bill pull out all of the costs associated with security concerns. So for example, even though you went to school and it was hot, it's a lot less safe to leave the doors and windows open now, so the HVAC becomes more important. But to do that, you have to upgrade the electrical, et cetera, et cetera. So when he pulled out all of those, it was a $44 million price tag roughly, which is about half of this. So if you were to do something like a security bond or a security referendum across all the schools, it kind of cuts this in half and makes it more palatable to the CIP. So that's just
Yeah, it's an idea.
An idea.
Yeah.
That's one idea, yeah, and I mean, you still have the buildings. though,
You still have
so
the buildings that you would
maintain.
have to maintain, but
I think
It
the other
doesn't
thing I
address
just,
roofs or boilers or, it still leaves a lot on
It's
this
a tricky
list.
problem.
It is.
Is that what you're gonna say?
I just wanted to point out that at the end of the, whether this is an 80 or 100 million project, whether it's 10 years, 14 years, or 18 years, at the end of the day, I suspect nearly all of this will have to get done. And at the end of the day, 4 of our schools will be between 60 and 70 and 75 years old, without any of the internal programmatic enhancements that one would like to see in a contemporary school designed for contemporary learning. It was good enough for our grandparents, I know, and it should be good enough for our grandchildren, but the world has changed. And do we want, even if we wanted to spend that kind of money on maintenance, the problem is the facility itself is still going to be totally obsolete. And as you said, we'll start, if it's 10 years, 14 years, 18 years, we're going to start that cycle of maintenance all over again.
I get the dilemma, but they already went to a referendum to change that problem, to get new schools and to update the existing schools, and it was
I
voted
understand, I
down.
understand. So I think the question before us, though, is...
So is the library, by the way. How many times?
is if the public is exposed to these data and understands what it's going to cost within a range over a period of time and what they're going to buy for it, would they, as informed consumers, say, that's not a reasonable investment? I
Was this
wouldn't do that.
information shared with the public when they
It-
made
Not
the
in this-
decision
In
on the
effect,
referendum?
not in this clear a fashion. And there was, and honestly, there was a regrettable misinformation campaign right before the referendum that included, bills in people's mailboxes that I think really created confusion in the electorate. So, but we're stuck with that mandate now.
Yeah.
So that's what we're saying, like, maybe as a community, if we present this in a true light and show how it's really unassailable. I mean, look at the backup to it. And again, the job these guys did, is amazing. And it really argues in favor of this is an untenable situation. If we continue, you can't keep doing it this way. We are better served, and we will find a much better value in considering alternate courses. The question is, we as a board don't feel comfortable yet until we hear feedback from the community in striking forth on another plan because we got shot down on one recently.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that this conglomerate here can work together all in one direction to get that community input so we can find something sane to do
Are there other
together.
paths to access money outside of us funding it 100% ourselves?
Sure.
That's why we
Yeah.
hired you, Ken.
Maybe some bond. If I can just I just want to make this one point, just looking at it, this is the first time I've seen this, so I'm just trying to get my arms around it. Number one, I think this is really illuminating as far as, and we should all be concerned about this. But the one school that, and we've talked about, that just jumps off the page is Polson. Polson's is scary. When you look at the numbers relative to the other 4 schools, and I'm not going to sit here and say I have an answer today, because I do not, but I definitely think that a maintenance approach to Polson is worrisome. And I don't have the answers, but I would definitely be interested in looking at other options from, whether it's a tear down or what have you. But to me, to spend $40 million over the course of the next 10 years to get no residual value back, that's just a bad investment. And I think that's something that we should have to really think long and hard about. Now, the other schools don't jump off the page like Polson does, but that's where I think the conversation should at least be very focused, at least in the interim, because it's scary looking at those numbers. It really is.
Your question earlier about was this shared? We began the last study with an order of magnitude, just to kind of get a ballpark feel. When we did this dive into details, the order of magnitude was really, they got the ball on the green. Maybe not in the hole, but they got the ball on the green. It was really, really close. So the prior board knew the magnitude of the problem, and Polson was a big part of that, and trying to find a way to address the elementary through the referendum, through bonding, and then Polson through a continuous maintenance CIP approach. That was the strategy at that point. But not having these numbers then at this level of specificity, if you want to really be honest and look backwards in time, maybe it could have been more helpful to have those numbers. I think the board was confident in those numbers because we had enough meetings with our consultants.
I know from what I'd heard, Ken, back then, that the numbers here are not necessarily, they're not surprising to me, from what I'd heard
Yeah, you were on the board.
2 years
You were
ago.
there, yeah.
So I mean, they were definitely in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And I know most of what you were talking about back then were structural things,
Yeah.
whether it be roof or some of these HVAC, because the HVAC takes up, or I should say, between the auditorium, AC, and the electrical, Kevin, that's 20 million right there. Right? So that's 50% of the whole thing, and I just,
What
all
was
these are
the
similar.
price tag for a new Folsom, wasn't it somewhere around 90 million? That's why we went the elementary school route?
Yeah, it's
Because
more
we thought-
it's
so
more
the
expensive to
new- yeah, so
construct
the
an
new-
older
A new
kid's school.
Folsom was going to be about a $90 million investment.
But not
I
up
kinda
front,
wonder,
it would be, well, it would be bonded and as opposed to coming directly out of our operating budget.
Right,
And-
that's why we decided to go for the
Yeah, and also,
elementary
again, not knowing what the maintenance requirements would be on a new building versus, maintaining, a dilapidated building. I guess, at least what I'm hearing is that I think we need to really, think long and hard about this and whether there's a necessity, and it sounds like there may very well be, for significant capital improvement as opposed to just maintain and continue on a very, merry way. Otherwise, we're just going to kick this can, to the next boards, will serve us hopefully, in the future.
Can I say, Seth, I understand where you're coming from as far as wanting to stick your neck out there again for another referendum or something like that, but I remember just thinking, again, it's all anecdotal, right? It's not like any one of us has the command of 2,000 of our electorates to get a better understanding about things, but it did seem sometimes I felt like people were wondering, hey, what about Folsom? Why isn't that one being considered? Again, no sort, not that I've done any survey, but it's just that it seemed like that was kind of a thought. And I, as we look at this number here that is so large, and you talk about the potential for obsolescence, and whether it's 70 years old or not, it is a middle school. I think it could be said that there are a lot of very affluent towns in the state of Connecticut that have very old elementary schools. That's, you go around town, you go down into the southwest part of the state, and you'll see a lot of that. So, but for middle school, a little bit of a different situation, and it might be something that people might be willing to consider. Kind of to Kevin's point around the fact that he wants to bulldoze Folsom, right? Kevin, did you say that?
Well,
So you got
based on the information in front of me, it certainly should be tabled. It certainly should be
People
tabled.
don't know. He's got a backhoe in his backyard, but I just, maybe, again, I know the neck doesn't want to get out there right now. I understand it, but I do think that when you look at these numbers and that the fact that this is so much of it is structural.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm sorry, just to respond real quick. I absolutely agree with you. I was specifically talking about the misinformation because it was asked, did we share this? But unscientifically, there were like categories of reasons why people voted against it. Some were believed that we wouldn't close Island Avenue if the referendum went down. Some believed some felt that we could get a better plan if this was voted down. So they were in favor of some new construction, but they didn't like this plan. Some were misinformed about the numbers, and I'm sure there were other.
A lot of reasons.
And some people didn't want to spend, that's fine. But it's not that we don't want to stick our necks out. We're more than happy, more prepared to do it, I think. I think we just want to know that we have community consensus before we do it, instead of jumping out there and having this, because you get that second strike, it's going to be really hard to get something done that I think we can all agree.
Seems the starting point is a consensus on what the problem is before we jump to the solution. And until the town absorbs these numbers, there isn't that consensus yet.
It's creating a burning platform, that's what it is.
Exactly, it's the burning platform. And then people can say, what are rational responses to this? And we can have a community dialogue, and out of that, something that can pass may well emerge.
What are forums that could be leveraged? I'm thinking about, Tom, what we're doing with Academy, and getting into surveying the community and soliciting input. Could something like that, a similar approach, be leveraged here, where there's a survey of the community or something to get options on the table? I don't know.
Sure.
I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah, but I also think that these boards need to show leadership as well. And I think that, listen, we obviously going to do what's in the best interest of the public. We want to bring in public comments and ideas, but ultimately these boards have to make decisions. And we just can't keep on waiting for the town to hopefully become more informed when it's been a tremendous challenge. And my personal feeling is that it would be great if these boards can align and come to the public with something saying, hey, we support this concept and this is why, as opposed to going to the town and saying, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? You want to buy, you want to rent, you want to sell, you want to do this? We have to come together with a plan that we can agree on. Because if we can't agree on it in this room, there's no way the town's going to agree on it. There's no possible way. And we saw that in the last referendum. And we continually see that in many projects we get ourselves involved in. Why can't these boards figure it out and present it to the town? And that's what I would like to see, and I think that's why we're all sitting in this room, because we all care, we're all passionate about this. But we can't keep on looking to the town people and saying, what do you want? Because we're not getting that information back, where it's like we're drinking through a fire hose. It's impossible to figure out what the town wants, but I think we can figure it out. There's no reason. We've got a lot of smart people in this room, a lot of passionate people. we should be able to figure out our own problems and then present it to the town. If they say, you know what, you guys are crazy, we go back to the drawing board and we figure it out. But that's where I think it starts and begins in this room.
So are you saying, Kevin, that you would suggest to the Board of Education to include us in this kind of a forum on a more regular basis, and that we try to gain consensus here amongst the boards?
Whether it's the entirety of all the boards, or it's a group of the, members from each of the boards coming together, but I do think that what we need is, to bring to the town is that we are on the same page here. We're
Demonstrating leadership.
Yeah, we're here together. A singular, unilateral voice saying, this is what the town needs, because we've looked at it, because we've lived with it, and that's what I think will work. Otherwise, I think we keep on going and asking for the silver bullet solution. It's not out there. It doesn't exist.
I want to offer a slightly different perspective. I agree with you completely that for anything to succeed, we have to have leadership from the three boards. I think we have to forge a consensus. But I think it would be a mistake for any or all of us to lead with a solution before the community accepts there's a problem. I think if we were writing on a clean slate, maybe we could do that, but we're not. I think there's tremendous.
What's the concern of us saying this is what we think? This is what we're. I don't understand that.
Just putting a straw man in place and saying, here's the problem.
I think what we need to do before we offer a solution is bring the public along to the acknowledgement that there's a problem. And once we get that, then I think we facilitate a discussion around a range of options. And with that input, we come to a consensus about what we think is the best way to go that will have community support. I don't think we abdicate our leadership role. This is a quintessential community decision. It goes beyond, I think, the authority of these boards, even the three of us together. This is a major, major decision. It's like the 10-year capital plan for the town. I think it's got to be shaped by true community engagement. And I think we can, it's not incompatible.
But I don't disagree with your thought.
That's nice to think that you can get that. I just think that's really a challenge. It's hard to.
I don't think we'll get consensus that on one plan.
Right.
I think we'll get consensus that we can't keep doing it this way.
Well, that's where we are.
And then we get to.
But we're not there. We're not there in the community, and we've got people out there who will attack this.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to let the community come to a judgment about the validity of the data, because there's already been, the fake news charge hit Madison a year ago. And so people are primed to believe this is a crock, and I think they're going to need to see the details, they're going to need to know the history, they're going to need to play with it on the website before we're going to have the credibility to move forward. That's my concern.
Why can't you do that at the same time that we're developing a plan?
Yeah.
Why can't they be done? One is an outreach to the
I
community,
agree.
letting them see the problem.
We're
The
happy.
other is an internal working committee to try to arrive at a solution, so that when the plan is, the problem's recognized, we're like, and here we go.
I think that they'll see it as
But let me ask you, can I hold this back? Because I
Trumped
just
up.
want to, the concern I have is that I think the problem we're having is that lack of any consensus from the public, and listen, nobody's sitting here and saying to ignore the public and say they don't count. It's very difficult to get a handle of the magnitude of these issues, and we can do it in a public forum, but who's going to go? And is it going to be well attended?
Still be just
And
the three
the
boards.
concern is, until we can come to a consensus as a group, then what happens, every time we leave a room, this person says this person says this person says that, and we kill any progress before it even begins. So all I'm saying is that if we can come together and we can agree on a plan, I think that's the best path to then bringing the town and getting them involved. That's all I'm
Right,
saying.
but I guess, let me build on that though, because I think part of leadership is, and demonstrating leadership is putting forth some sort of a communication plan. And I think a communication plan is in part this, that needs to get out into the hands of the public, whether it be via a town hearing or some sort of a public meeting or something, where maybe all three boards are available for Q&A and conversation. You guys presented as the Board of Education, maybe there's a series of them. But I think there needs to be some sort of a communication plan first, to lay it out to the public so that it's not just hearing about it in the newspaper, no disrespect though.
Whichever way you want to cut it, that's fine, but I think that, putting the Board of Education and making them solely the ones who are going to carry this ball is not fair.
No.
So,
No, and I think we have to recognize we are stewards of the community, and we do represent, all of us are.
We were elected to be so, right?
Right, and so, but I do think, I loved Happy's idea that it could be done in tandem.
Yeah, and we already have a lot of work done, fortunately, because we had the whole facility study that was all well documented and maybe in some way dismissed in the last referendum by some people. We have all that work done already and this new body of work. I think we can do it in a truncated fashion, but I think it would be a mistake to go forward without getting some community input and having them recognize that, something's gotta give.
I can help you with that. The Polson parents want Polson done. The
Yeah.
other parents want that.
Exactly.
I mean,
It's
I
true.
can clear it up for you.
There's bias in
One
town?
thing that has changed is there will be one less elementary school next year, so that one less community that wants a new school.
Can I just jump off? I think, don't jump what,
Turn the camera.
I think what
Just
Kevin,
kidding.
I think what
Record
Kevin's
show
trying to
it's
say
Gene
is
talking.
being misrepresented in the sense that he's not saying you eliminate the public input, but
Yes.
it is our
Thank you.
responsibility as it is our responsibility as elected officials to look at the data, to make informed recommendations, to work with consultants, to bring together to the community a viable, well-thought-out, well-represented plan. What is happening, I think, and the concern, and Kevin, if I'm not correctly speaking for you, let me know, but I think what's happening is there is a perception we just keep handing these things over to the community. We wait for them to give us feedback. It creates a little bit of chaos. They don't have enough information or have not taken the time to read the information, but they are emotional about it. They come back to us and everybody has a different opinion, and then we get nothing done.
Yeah.
So I think to his point, what he's saying is we do have a responsibility to take a leadership role here, balance it, as Happy said, with some community input, and Katie, I agree with you. But I think it is our responsibility as elected officials to understand this data with experts, and maybe the answer is to have an outside consultant come in and facilitate. That's what we did all those, 2 years ago. We had somebody else come in and get input from the public. But I think there's a balance between giving it to the public, letting them play with the numbers, and us just washing our hands of it, and nothing gets done. So I think that's, and Betty, you don't have to jump in, that's not what you said, and I know it's not, so I'm with you. I'm not saying you said that, but I believe that we do need to have more organized thoughts among the three boards to present information to the public so they can make an informed decision. But we are going to get 50 million different inputs if you just turn it over to the public, and we have to find that balance. I don't know what it is, but we have to find that balance.
I have one quick comment. I had a very modest goal that I shared with the board at tonight's meeting. It was just that we would all agree that we have a community problem that we have to solve. I think that goal has clearly been accomplished. I think we're overachieving. And I just think that framing the problem maybe is where the community piece is out there. We have a leadership role in framing the problem because we have information the community doesn't have necessarily that we can share.
Yeah.
So I think that is a very modest next step, is to frame this for the community. It didn't go away. And then some wonderful ideas ensued after that as far as how we can approach it. But just for the three boards to be on the same page, that this is a collective problem. The Board of Ed, I want to speak to the board if I can, wasn't looking to just kind of dump this and say, here it is. Let's give us $100 million, let's do this here. It's a problem we have to solve, and I think it's been widely acknowledged. Galen?
Oh, I just wanted to pick up on Gene's point. Just give it a limited incubation period for the public. 3 months? I mean, just 4 months, 6 months, whatever. But just have a kind of a defined period so it doesn't just go out there.
And we can define the parameters too. We can make it a 2-question survey in effect. Do you agree that we need to change course? And would you want to see a plan, a joint plan coming from the three boards or something?
Can I just say, Gene, aside from my own philosophical predispositions, I think given the history, the recent history, leading with a proposal before you do what Galen said, that is, lay out the problem, let the town ruminate on it, get some reaction. If you don't do that, a lot of people will believe that this was all planned. It's a game. It was all planned to get a predetermined result.
Yeah.
And
They're gonna
that's the
believe
last
that,
thing. Well,
right.
some
But
people are going to say that anyway.
Right.
And we
But-
can prove them wrong through the process we use.
Yeah, I don't think what I'm saying is that you put a plan out there without input from the public. I'm saying there's gotta be a balance.
Shouldn't there, I mean, there are alternatives to this, and if you just lay this out, then we're assuming that people will understand, people that were involved perhaps in the whole misinformation, the failed referendum, but people just looking at it, I mean, I think we need to say there are alternatives.
Yes, but you have to
We don't
frame
have
the
to- we don't
problem.
have to-
You have to put out the problem and frame it.
Right, we don't have to have a plan. We say there are alternatives to this and suggest perhaps
Yeah,
a.
assuming people want alternatives, right?
Right, but at this point of where we are in the process, this is the plan, right?
Yeah.
This is the only plan we have right now.
Well, yeah,
Right? So we need to be clear about that.
This has been adopted.
We haven't explored other options,
To
right? So
pursue it.
This is the plan.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that the longer it's out there in the community, we still have to pay for all of this
Right.
maintenance costs.
At a 4% annual.
Right, we're not gonna stop doing
That's
everything.
a really important,
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say one last, because obviously I'm very supportive of any community outreach. I mean, to think otherwise, I don't know why, that was not what I was inferring in any way. I'm just saying what I have not seen is the leadership in this room really stand together and work together for a common goal. As opposed to, hey, Board of Ed, go up there and then just get hammered, in the shooting range. And then we just like, it was a terrible idea anyway, or this one goes this way. I'm just saying, I think we would all want to avoid, everyone, just acting individually, whether individually as a member or as a board. But recognizing we are working together as a collective whole.
Yeah, no,
I
I think
second
that's
that.
valuable.
Aspirational, I love it.
Can I just make all I would, and I know you guys have looked at this and you've thought about it, but I would strongly encourage that if there are line items here that you feel might be perceived as non-essential, I just get them out and I put them in spreadsheet tab 2, instead of here. Because I do see a couple things that I might consider to be, as the uninitiated until Bill blesses me with his knowledge. And I just know that there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to look at this thing in detail, obviously. And they're going to look at it and they're going to say, I am whatever, and you believe that was out there, and they said it was a need. I really feel that they should be stripped out, because there have to be some, I really want that, but I know I don't really need it.
They're also, they're prioritized.
So but
Yeah,
if
but
I
listen-
could just respond, Mark, because leading up to, we've been doing this since, late November, right, early December. Leading up to this, we've had that with those who go behind closed doors, and we look at all these different items. And I keep coming back to, okay, it's still an $80 million problem. And I'm not saying you're not saying that, but I think it gets back to the point that Kenny was making. If we can get the community to not focus in on one pet product. I can't believe you're putting LED TVs in, or whatever it is, it becomes a lightning rod, and then all of a sudden we've lost the entire problem we have to solve. And I think that's what's important, if I can emphasize Kenny's point again. Kevin, Kenny's over there. Kevin. Sorry. Having the boards collectively focus on the big problem, and I think you're trying to get rid of the distractors, so that doesn't come up, and I admire that. If we can just keep focusing on whatever that number is, it's a big number still. It's still a big problem. So let's strip those out and say it's 80 million. Now what are we going to do?
Well, I'm just saying that some of those other items that are not part of that 80% could perhaps be done in a different fashion. That's all.
It
There
could.
are
It
different
could.
ways to skin the
It
cat,
could.
right? And I'm just saying that, you're
I hear
gonna
you.
get the
I hear you.
detractor
And we've done
probably
this.
either way,
We've gone
but
through it.
I would just think.
It's a fair
But I think
point.
Mark's point speaks to the point and the need to come together, right? Because isn't that what we're really saying? Because this is what happens, and there could be some micro points that people disagree with, and that prevents us from moving forward with the whole.
And I think as a board, we really did debate and go through a lot of these things and look at it, as Happy said, in different, through different lenses. And we really feel good about what's here in terms of the necessity and the prioritization that went into it.
Can I just
Katie,
ask?
can I jump off one thing that you're saying? May I suggest that we do this again?
Yeah.
We've all just gotten this information right now. I think we need time to look at it. I think going back to Kevin's point, we should be able to come back as a group to try to collectively have these conversations. So Katie, I want to go off of what you and your board did to look at it. Now let's look at it from a financial point of view, from a town point of view,
Yes.
and come back together and say, okay, this is what the Board of Ed feels, this is where we are collectively, and come up with, and even if, Mark, that is you saying, is this really necessary in terms of, you know, the prioritization? I think that may benefit, because right now we're all talking from our perspectives, and those of you haven't seen this before, it's a lot to absorb. So I think if we could take this, go through it, come back together again and have another discussion, maybe have Colliers here, it may benefit us then to try to get on the same page as Kevin's saying. And Kevin's saying, because I really think it is important we're all on the same page.
And this is all online now too, so.
Right, that's what I'm saying, so
People
let's
can
set
dig in.
up another meeting.
Awesome.
Gene, I'm sorry, Gene, that really emphasizes, you know, at the outset of framing tonight, this was, as Collier said, a dispassionate look. It didn't consider the voting electorate, it didn't consider the finances, it was just the conditions. So I think it's important that we now include those.
We're not leaving until we go over every line item.
But I'm
Number one,
ready
Billy.
to do
Let's
that.
go.
Before you do that, Bill, I've got a technical question. The priorities are in column C. In the
Yes.
online version, presumably, we can filter or sort on the priorities, to your point, right?
Yeah,
So the lower the number, the lower the number, the
Oh, you mean you could pull out all the priority ones, or?
Ben, I believe in order to accommodate the ADA accommodations, we had to put it as a static document and not something that you can sort. I don't think the online version
Okay,
can be
well then,
sorted. I can double check.
could we do this, please? Could somebody in your shop
Yeah.
produce a version of this that
Sortable
is
version.
sorted by priority? So to Mark's point, you could look at the lowest priority items.
Oh, then the
as
schedule on the bottom.
Yeah, priorities.
But he's doing this
Yeah, but
like in
it's a
Excel.
PDF online, so you can't manipulate it as a PDF.
No, but it's asking if
What happens when
somebody.
you go to priority?
Priority right here.
Send them this version?
Oh, I see. You didn't
You
put
got
the
the
Excel
tables.
online.
Right, can we have this electronic
Can't
version?
they just have this?
The problem is that it's, this points to the resources and reports on our network. So if it gets emailed to you, you will click on a tab, but it won't have the resources to connect it to back it up.
Okay, but I guess all we're looking for is
That's
a
We can produce
list
a report by priority.
sorted by priority so that someone can draw a line
So
and
we can
say,
take that
knock out
PDF and
this
send that
$12 million.
So we have it in two ways in priority. We have it overall, forget the school, and then we have it in priorities by school. So you can get it both ways.
So
We
if
will
I
get
could
it
just
electronically.
say, this is exact same thing we do with the CIP, we prioritize it, Bennett's asking for what we asked for in the same way. So I think anyone on the CIP is used to this, and the same frustration on CIP, when it's a PDF because of
Yeah.
the ADA compliant, you can't manipulate it. The only other thing I can suggest is what they do with the CIP book, is that you make books for everybody and have all that information within tabs.
Yeah.
That is a way in which the same thing the CIP does, so that people can prioritize. As Bennett's saying, you can then go through, and you can put all the ones together, all the twos together. But it is gonna make a difference for people to be able to manipulate it, which is gonna be a problem. But that's what I would suggest. If you want that, Bennett, do the same thing we do with the CIP.
Yeah, I mean, however it's easiest for you, but I think if we all have a version that is pre-sorted for those who
Yep.
don't want to
We can do that.
manipulate it themselves, that would be common ground when we come together.
Ascending or descending?
Well put.
Your
Go
choice.
ahead, Tom.
Can I also just suggest, not to add extra work, but usually with the consulting report, it usually is, in addition to the spreadsheet, there usually is some type of narrative. It doesn't have to be long. What was the charge to the consultant?
what's the operating definition of maintenance? I heard that a lot at the beginning of these discussions. Seems to be, what is maintenance versus enhancement? So was there an operating definition of maintenance? And also there was some description of what the prioritization was, but maybe if you could just talk a little bit about who set the priorities and what were the standards by which the priorities were set. I think that for making a record, having this out there, I think having that narrative would be very helpful, I think, important.
Yeah, it was the facilities committee made a recommendation to the board, and the board went over the,
We have operational definitions for the priorities, and we can dig in deeper to maintenance versus enhancement and a couple of the other points.
I think that you guys are making a record, not just the spreadsheet, but some of the operational definitions.
that creates context.
Tom, what was that document that, I've seen it, that had the criteria and what's that?
Yeah, that's the operational definitions of the.
Can you guys just send that out electronically?
Yeah.
Then I think
Taking lots of
that would
notes.
satisfy.
I have it somewhere. It's in a pile in my office somewhere.
Nice,
Yes.
nice.
I think in the
I thought it was
previous
on the
meeting.
staff. I was trying to find it so I could bring it up. but I
Kenny,
was
do
straight
you?
out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one other thought for, or comment for folks to maybe consider and think about as we're trying to become more aligned as three groups working together to come up with a common charge and a strategy that we're going to share with the folks of the town of Madison. Board of Ed's, a $50 million budget, town's a $30 million budget. You're talking about another $100 million over a 10-year period. There's other, the library's got a $9 million bond coming up. You've got a couple of assets out there in the town, with Island Avenue and Academy. I think we got to kind of put all of this together when we're talking to the people about, hey, this is what we need. We have to figure out a way to get all of these things together so that we don't get so much pushback on one silo.
That's where having all three of us working
Right,
together works, because we don't have the academies.
Because we're gonna need the sale and the tax revenue from Academy to afford some of this stuff, because we don't have unlimited resources. And we have to create that message to the people of the town so that they have a real good understanding as to not only what the challenges are, but they're gonna wanna say, okay, well, we have things that can generate revenue, we have things that can generate cash now to help support and help cover some of the costs associated with what we need. I just don't think we can be successful together unless we incorporate all those things to, and I don't wanna boil the ocean, but at the same time, it's going to be tough.
Kenny, I totally agree. In joint leadership, Katie and I had talked about making this Board of Ed plan part of the town's strategic plan over 10 years.
Yeah, we've tried to do
And
that
we're,
in a
well,
public
we haven't
setting.
done one yet, so we're gonna do it, and I agree with you, and that's the only way. We need to put all of the needs of the town together and then come up with something when we all agree as the three boards.
And that's the message out to the
Correct,
town,
and I
right?
think that's where the strategic plan, we pick the company. I think that's a great way to kind of mesh these together.
The only problem I see with that is a couple of the problems have become so controversial or whatever, that you don't want a real, a real stick of the situation to be a
Well, we won't know
weight around our neck.
till we try. We gotta sit down and.
Right, we
We
gotta
gotta
try.
Report it.
The schools nest into the larger picture of the town. The schools are a part of
The
the.
school is why we moved here,
Yes.
all right? That's a huge decision maker for people that want to come to the town, so
Yeah.
it's more than that. It's really what's driving a lot of activity in our town, so we have to think about it as a big,
Which
big
will
picture
hopefully,
thing.
in turn,
Yep.
bring people here to fund initiatives. that-
Right.
Great.
So Tom, will you set up a time, Katie, will you set up a time where we can meet again, once everyone has a chance to?
Actually, Gene, I was thinking, we talked this morning that I don't think we have a joint leadership meeting scheduled for
We
the next
don't.
month. So Wendy's going to try to get something on the books for at least the three boards that we represent, the three board chairs.
Right. she
And then
said
we can come up with a plan from there.
You want to wait till then to come up?
Well, we can meet sooner than later, I mean, as long as you're available.
Sure.
I thought she was saying, when we get the three boards together. the full
I'd like
three
to get the three boards,
Can we
right.
get
I
the full
think
three
Tom's
boards
point
together?
is that we would meet and come up with a time.
Yeah.
But if you could get all the information to the three boards, then I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I have right now the sort by priority Any of the operational definitions we've come up with and report narratives, that was information that was requested. We can get that out to the three boards. Priority definitions, yeah. I would just suggest that the three chairs get together. I can join that meeting in the joint leadership and say, okay, what are our next steps? And then we can recommend it to our boards. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah. Works. Well, thank you. This is, I think we definitely exceeded our goal for tonight. We really appreciate all the input and direction, and look forward to doing it some more.
You guys have 2 more hours to go now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
You don't want to stay? Not sticking around?
Thank you. That's one quick question before we close. Are you thinking about setting up a recurring meeting for every Wednesday? I know everybody wants their summer, but maybe let's put some recurring meetings in the calendar, invite everybody, and see what kind of acceptance rate we get back. You said?
You mean of the three boards?
Yeah, because if we don't do it, we believe it another month. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving along. Thanks, Billy. Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Should I move back to the cheap seats?
Board member comments.
I just want to say that I thought that was fantastic, and I'm looking forward to working together with the other two boards going forward.
Excited. Ditto. Anybody else? Okay, so moving on to committee reports. Planning committee.
We did not meet last week.
Personnel committee.
No report.
Policy committee.
Yes, I have a report. The policy committee met tonight, and you'll see in your packets, we are bringing 7 policies to the board for first reading tonight. In your packets, you'll see the policies with revisions marked. Just a quick overview. Policy number 3150 is medical reimbursement for special education students. This policy requires modification to reflect recent legislative changes. It's been reviewed by Dr. Talia. It's also cross-referenced in the next policy, the health and medical records policy number 5125.1. It is a new mandatory policy. It's a duplicate from CAVE's existing policy. It requires the district comply with HIPAA and FERPA when applicable to maintain the privacy of protected health information. Tom, jump in if I miss anything.
No,
you're doing great.
Yeah.
Policy 6161.3 is comparability of services. These are revisions to a mandatory policy that ensures equity and comparability of services among schools, in particular maintaining equity when we receive federal funding. This policy was last updated in 2001. The proposed revisions include reporting and documentation requirements, as well as specific exceptions to the comparability requirements. Policy number 6090.10, individualized education program, special education program. This is a new and mandated policy. It's a duplicate of CAVE's revised IEP and special education program policy. It's responding to a 2017 Supreme Court ruling which interpreted the scope of the free appropriate public education requirements within the Individuals with Disabilities Act. Dr. Talia has suggested that we not keep any part of our existing 20-year-old policy, but rather adopt CAVE's new IEPs and special education program policy that reflects the court's unanimous ruling. Policy number 5144.4 is physical exercise and discipline of students. This is a mandatory policy which we do not currently have in place. It is based on 2013 legislation that required boards of education to adopt such policies. This policy, with few exceptions, states that school employees may not prevent an elementary school student from participating in recess or in other sustained opportunities for physical activity as a form of discipline. In addition, school employees may not require students in grades K through 12 to engage in physical activity as a form of discipline during the school day. Policy number 6162.51, survey of students and students' privacy. This is a mandatory policy which we do not currently have in place. It concerns the types of notifications the school must provide to parents, guardians, and students prior to the use of federal Department of Education funded surveys, analyses, or evaluations. And finally, bylaw number 9450, board committees. This was brought to the policy committee's attention for consideration by board member Greg DeSantis on June 28th. And we are moving it to the board for a first reading. This policy proposal or bylaw amendments were shared with the entire board as well on June 28th, allowing members time to review and comment in advance of this first reading. Bylaw number 9450 was adopted in 1973 and was last revised 13 years ago. The revisions propose 3 changes. First of all, to make the existing temporary facilities committee permanent. Secondly, to amend, expand, and retitle the charge of the planning committee to the curriculum and student development committee. And thirdly, to establish a new communications committee. So this is the first reading, the first discussion of the policy committee, her discussion tonight. I've been receiving comments. The policy committee's next regular meeting is scheduled for August 14th at 5:30. However, we discussed and I will be requesting a special board workshop between now and August 14th to allow for further discussion of bylaw number 9450 so that any amendments and revisions and comments from all board members can be incorporated before a second reading on August 14th. So I'll work with Katie to get that special workshop set up. In the meantime, any comments, feedback, suggestions, revisions, edits are most welcome. And that is my report. Okay.
Questions? Could you, I should know this, but I don't. Could you clarify the process?
Yes.
The number of readings and the internal distribution?
I have it here if you want.
And because there's been some confusion about that.
Sure. Just specifically for, generally for all policies in our bylaws?
Well,
I mean,
I mean, how many readings
or-
it takes, if there's any obligation to distribute information to members beyond the committee, if there's a time limit for consideration.
Okay.
Because it seemed a bit arbitrary to have one member just have 24 hours to review it, to my understanding. So I don't know the process, so I just need to.
Okay.
I actually went through I did a lot of research on policy and policy revisions, and I actually printed out every board policy / bylaw that pertains to this issue. In terms of, and I can certainly copy this and give it to everyone, but they're all online. In terms of revising a policy or bringing a bylaw change, really a board member can do it here at the table. A community member can suggest a bylaw change. It reads, the board will give the policy proposal a first reading and then direct it to the policy committee and to interested and or affected groups for input and response following that. So Greg's on the phone. So Greg, feel free to pipe in since this was your proposal. But he gave us 3 weeks to, that it went to the policy committee and then to the full board, which I thought was really generous to give people time even before the first reading to weigh in and give. And this is by no means the end of the process. This is, in fact, the beginning. The first reading brings it to the table and allows for discussion, collaboration, and amendments if people, if we need to. And I think the workshop is a great idea. To really do that before a second read. And does that answer your question? But there's a lot.
No, it helps.
Okay.
I still have to catch up.
I could
Sorry, Greg.
jump in just to say too, having read the bylaws before the proposal was made, I think the bylaws are subject to a little bit of interpretation and maybe could use some cleanup in terms of the language around readings. So I just wanted to make sure that I was being as, following the letter as much as possible in terms of getting it out there as far in advance as possible. Partially because of the bylaws, but also because I think it's just more useful for folks to take a look at it and be able to provide feedback well in advance of this meeting. So anyway, that's probably in and of itself a future policy item, just to make sure that it's clear in the future what should and should not be the process, or to just really drill down to exactly what is permissible. But I tried to make sure that I was way within the bounds of that for this proposal.
Do these have to go before the executive committee before they go to the wider board? Or does the executive committee have to be informed of any?
No.
No.
Okay.
In the past, the board has always practiced policy consideration differently. And it was more of a, I think it was, frankly, looking back on it, by departing from the bylaws and making it so that everything had to go through the committee first, gave the policy committee chair an inordinate amount of control over the agenda and what policies would make it out to the floor. When you read the bylaws and what was intended, that we've not been doing for at least 10 years, anyone can bring a policy to the floor, and then it gets referred to the committee.
Right.
Now, the committee could still decide to not advance that policy back to the board for a vote, but
That's after the first reading.
yeah, maybe after the first reading should come first. That's when
And then it goes back
a
to
member
the committee,
or
and
someone.
the committee does
Yep.
the work.
Yeah.
If there's work to be done. I mean, a lot of the policies we discussed today were mandated, right?
Right.
Statute
Yeah.
kind of things. So, and that's typically what we've, in my experience on the board, what we've undertaken is stuff that CABE gives us that are state mandates. This is, looking at our bylaws, this is a 13-year-old, and there are several in our bylaws that are older than that. We're ripe for review. And so this is kind of beginning that process.
Yeah, I'm probably always going to be skeptical of changes unless there's a clear need or a burden of proof. That's just my general orientation. I was wrong with the facilities committee. I was skeptical of that. I think Seth's done a great job leading that. So kudos, really. And I thought that was just an excellent job of compromise. Emily, Happy, Katie came together to, well, I was there for the wine, but came together to make this, a reality, a possibility. One thing I had a question about was why the hurry up to make it permanent when the understanding was we were going to keep it for a 2-year trial period?
I think there's not a hurry up. I think that this now goes to, we now have, almost a month before our next Board of Ed meeting and a workshop in between. And we've had 3 weeks prior to this meeting. So in my opinion, I think there's been a lot of time. One of the things I said in the policy committee meeting earlier was that a lot of boards, and the research that I've been doing, do a lot of their policy and bylaw amendments over the summer when district work is slower. And so it seems to stand to reason that we would address these things now before, especially during this year of transition, when we have the opportunity to.
I think the understanding is that when we voted for something, we supported something with a term and a date, that's when we would revisit it when we reached that date. We didn't vote on it
Right.
so that we could establish it, so that we
Right.
could come back in 3 months
No,
and
I
try
hear
to
what you're
crack it.
saying, and I think because it's tied in to the planning committee bylaws, because planning used to have some facilities work within it, that's why they are conjoined. That's the only reason. Now, we may decide and reach consensus that we want to keep it temporary till 2020. That's great. I think that is a yet to be had conversation. And I think there's a lot to be discussed and pulled apart as a group, whoever's interested in being a part of that.
And I'd like to say too, that there's 3 aspects of this bylaw for review, and the facilities committee is one portion of that. But I, in particular, especially after discussion tonight, am especially eager to discuss a communications committee. I think that's something that, this is not a rushed process, we have lots of time to discuss this, but I do think in particular that that committee, if we were to agree on it, could do some pretty important work very soon, and we have a good, the time is good for that. So I think this is a discussion, and like Katie said, we're gonna continue to discuss it, and I'm not, nothing
With
has
open
been
minds.
set in stone here.
I will say that sometimes when you turn over a stone, you find out a lot of stuff. And having a complete focus on facilities and reviewing the statutory mandate for boards of ed in their facilities duties, which are clearly spelled out in a very prescribed statute. It doesn't necessarily say you have to have a facilities committee, but considering that that is the way that our board chooses to work, is through a committee structure, we essentially have to have a facilities committee. And we have been dropping the ball, I'm sorry to say it publicly, I didn't say that out loud. There are some mandates that we haven't been able to meet because we haven't had the focus on it.
Ideally, I think it'd be great to have like a summertime bylaw review committee, or something
I think the
like
bylaws
policy
require,
committee.
I think the bylaws require
Right,
annual review.
We are
They do.
right
Yeah,
for,
right.
they do.
Not change, I'm a conservative. but
Right,
review.
annual review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to change just for change's sake, but to me, based on the proposal that Greg sent, it warrants further discussion and collaboration as a group.
I just like to preserve collegiality. in all the-
I'm with you. Absolutely.
Thanks, Steve.
Anybody else?
So stay tuned for a special workshop and
That'd be great.
I have all my notes of comments and edits and suggestions, so
Thank you.
keep them coming.
Okay, moving on, Finance Committee.
We met this evening and we closed the books for 2017, 2018. There are still some potential invoices that may roll in through August. So our next meeting is September 11th, and at that point we will finalize the budget for this past year.
Great, thank you. Linda Black. Learn Liaison, nothing to report. Facilities Committee.
Okay, so we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and first we had 2 members of the Brown School Opal Committee, which is outside play and learning facility committee, come along with that committee's consultant. They presented the committee's work to date, including draft plans of a sample outside play and learning facility. The committee took note that there is presently no modern play area at Brown School other than a hard macadam surface that has as a wonderful feature an electrical transformer jutting into it. It's a real knee scraper of the facility. The plan is to create an age-appropriate and handicap-accessible learningscape with an outdoor classroom, paths through lightly wooded areas to promote creative, unstructured play in the outdoors, and of course a playscape area with a modern, injury-reducing surface. Brown School has gone without any playground before now, so the conversion of the school into an intermediate school will require the construction of such a space. So that was just, we got a presentation from the committee and did not take any action or anything on it. Next, we continued our discussion surrounding the facility's 10-year master plan of maintenance and the CIP plan. We voted unanimously to seek a tri-board meeting to share our process and findings and to kick off a community discussion about how to address the maintenance needs of our schools. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Audience response to information presented / liaison report. No?
No, the only thing I'm going to add, because I didn't say anything during the mosh pit, is time is marching on, you have projects that you need to get done. It would be helpful if Billy could call out any projects that have been dropped in. We had our first CIP meeting. It would be helpful to know if there's anything new in there and what is new, so that we can accommodate that in our thinking.
New in the CIP.
Right, so
For this
something that wasn't in there when we closed the process out last year for this coming fiscal year. That make sense?
Yeah. I think
Send it
so.
to me. Okay. Got it. Thank you. Consent agenda. So,
I sent an email to the board right before that we have to remove, I'm going to recommend remove 8.4, which is the donation from the National Federation of High Schools for the live streaming cameras. As we began to advance this one and get excited, there were a couple of strings attached that we want to double check before we accept anything. That's always the issue with donations is, the strings are there, so I'm going to just ask to remove that tonight.
So Greg, if you're still there, I have to have a motion to remove that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so we'll start with a motion to remove the donation of $5,000 from the National Federation of High School in conjunction with CIAC to Daniel Hand High School for a camera live stream, to live stream Daniel Hand events.
Which is consent agenda.
8.4.
8.4.
Sorry, I skipped ahead. Yeah.
So moved.
Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. So
Thank
that's
you.
just to remove.
Apologize for that.
Wendy, did you get that? I'm trying to keep track
Got
on here
it.
too. Okay. So now I need going back up to 8.3, I need a motion, oh, the whole consent, okay. And motion to approve the consent agenda.
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
discussion?
Yes.
Yep.
I just wanted to call out an awesome $12,550 donation from the Ryerson Elementary PTO to Ryerson Elementary School to assist in the purchase of school-based resources. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. A motion to approve the minutes of the June 19th, 2018 Board of
Oh, we didn't-
Education
we-
meeting.
we-
Oh,
Consent agenda.
forgive me. That was the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. So now,
Katie?
yes,
You motioned to
Remove.
the item from the consent agenda,
yeah?
which then puts it on the regular agenda, and you need a motion to presumably table it.
Okay. So now I would like a motion to table the donation of $5,000 from the National Federation of High School in conjunction with the CIAC to Daniel Hand High School for a camera to live stream Daniel Hand events.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you, Greg. Now I would like a motion to approve the minutes of the June 19th, 2018 Board of Education meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Any old business? Any future agenda items? Meetings and dates of importance are attached, July, August, and September. And now I need a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the superintendent's evaluation.
So moved.
Second?
Galen.
Galen, thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Motion passes. Oh no.